Close your eyes for just a second. I want you to picture this. It's the late 1800s. An immigrant has just arrived at a bustling American harbor. The air is thick, filled with the steam of a massive transatlantic ship right behind them. This person is clutching a battered, cracked leather suitcase, one that has somehow survived a grueling, terrifying ocean crossing. And tied to the handle of that weathered suitcase is a simple, handwritten family identification tag. That tag holds a name.
So what if the last name you've written, spoken, and carried your entire life is actually a hidden message from your ancestors? Think about it. Your surname isn't necessarily just some random word printed on your driver's license. It might actually be a clue that tells you exactly what your ancestors did for a living centuries ago. Or perhaps it perfectly describes the medieval village or landscape where they built their homes. It could even be a physical description of whose son or daughter they were. Your surname may just be one of the absolute most fascinating places to begin discovering your true family history.
And this incredible exploration into the stories behind German surnames is brought to you by German Heritage USA. They're doing amazing work connecting Americans from coast to coast with the people, the places, the history, the traditions, and the really profound stories behind their German roots. You can find them at GermanHeritageUSA.com.
Section 1. The 500-year-old clue.
Okay, let's dive into this explainer and transport ourselves back in time. Imagine a medieval German town several centuries ago. Picture the half-timbered buildings, the tall church towers, the soft glow of candlelight in the windows. Back then, communities were growing and people were becoming a lot more mobile. The problem was, you might have several men named Johann or Heinrich or Friedrich living in the exact same village. If someone said, "Hey, go give this to Johann," you'd have to ask, well, which Johann? They desperately needed a way to tell people apart. And that brings us to how surnames were born. People simply began adding descriptions. So one Johann might become known as Johann the Smith. Another might be identified by where he lived, like Johann from the Hill. Or maybe he was identified by his father's name, Johann Heinrich's son. Over multiple generations, what started as a highly practical, simple identifier slowly transformed into a permanent, hereditary family name. This means your last name might literally be a 500-year-old snapshot frozen in time.
Let's think about geographical surnames for a second. Hundreds of years ago, there were no zip codes, right? There were no street addresses or standardized government IDs. So before all of that modern infrastructure, people used the surrounding geography as a highly convenient way to identify exactly where a family lived. A surname could quite literally preserve a miniature description of the physical landscape that surrounded your ancestor's home.
If your last name contains one of these common German words, it's acting like a tiny historical snapshot of what your ancestors saw right outside their window. Words like Berg, meaning mountain or hill, Bach, meaning stream, Fold for forest, Stein for stone, Feld for field, or Brook for bridge. These embedded words are incredible clues to the physical environment of your family's past. For example, if your last name is Steinberg, that translates to stone plus mountain or hill. If you're a Grunwald, that's green plus forest. Or maybe Bachmann, someone associated with a stream or brook. Now keep in mind, this is detective work. It's not a perfect GPS coordinate. The exact same surname could have developed completely independently in entirely different regions, but it is an incredibly powerful starting point.
Section 2. What did they do?
But what if your name doesn't describe a place? Picture the village clerk recording trades into a thick, handmade ledger with a quill pen. Outside the window, the blacksmiths, the millers, and the farmers are hard at work. Centuries ago, these professions were absolutely essential to everyday life. And eventually, the actual jobs these people did every single day became some of Germany's most recognizable family names.
So the crucial point here is that names like Schmidt or Schneider weren't originally just words on a birth certificate. They were actual workshops. They were livelihoods. Take Schmidt, or variations like Schmidt and Schmid. That name brings to mind a rugged village blacksmith, the craftsman who forged tools and horseshoes by a roaring fire. It's the German cousin of the English name Smith. And Schneider comes from the German verb meaning to cut. These were the village tailors.
And the list just goes on and on. Müller identified someone who operated the crucial village green mill. Fischer was a fisherman. Weber was the weaver, constantly producing cloth on a wooden loom. Becker was the baker, bringing fresh bread out of a hot stone oven. Wagner was the wagon maker. It is absolutely mind-blowing to think that Americans today are still carrying the exact titles of these 500-year-old occupations right there in their family names.
Section 3. The Journey to America.
Now, the name your ancestors carried in a medieval German village isn't always exactly the name you carry today. As families packed up those battered suitcases, held their children close, and boarded massive steamships for the journey to America, a lot changed. But first, we have to gracefully debunk one of our country's most persistent immigration myths. Many families believe their German name was arbitrarily changed by some inspector at Ellis Island. But here's the fact. Ellis Island officials were not routinely inventing new names. Passenger manifests were generally created at the port of departure over in Europe, and inspectors in America simply compared the arriving passengers against those already existing records.
Your surname absolutely did change, but it actually happened gradually, over decades, mostly after immigrants had already settled in their new American communities. You can actually track the evolution of a name across generations. For instance, you might see an ancestor recorded as Müller in the 1800s, which then becomes Müller in the early 1900s, drops down to Müller, and eventually settles as Miller in the present day. So why did these spellings shift? Well, historical spelling was far less standardized than it is today. A census taker might just write down what they heard phonetically. Handwriting was easily and often misread. Plus, the German umlauts, those two little dots over the A, O, or U, were very frequently dropped or altered once they got to America. Sometimes families deliberately Americanized their names to blend in, especially during periods of anti-German sentiment around World War I. So that missing umlaut might literally be hiding deep German roots right there in your family tree.
Section 4. Unlocking your family story.
So how do we actually get past all these spelling changes and translations? It's time to move beyond the dictionary and start uncovering your own family-specific documented history. Imagine the thrill of putting on a pair of white archival gloves and slowly moving a magnifying glass across a centuries-old German church register. Suddenly, right there among the faded ink, a familiar surname appears. You zoom in. That genuine thrill of discovery, following those historical breadcrumbs across generations, is exactly what genealogy is all about.
And the clues are hiding right in front of us if you just know where to look. You'll want to search old church baptism and marriage registers, passenger manifests, naturalization documents, and census records. But hey, don't forget your own attic. Pull out the old family Bibles. Look at faded family photo albums and actually take the time to turn the pictures over. You would be amazed at the notes, the dates, and the names written on the backs of old photographs. If you're ready to do this, here are the steps. First, always start with yourself and work backward, just one generation at a time. Second, never just search the spelling you use today. Search every single phonetic and spelling variation you can possibly think of. And third, the Holy Grail. Identify the specific German hometown. You see, Germany is enormous when you're searching records, but finding the specific ancestral village, that completely changes the game. It turns your surname into a physical, real place you could actually go and visit today.
Section 5. A bridge to the past.
Your surname is a living link. It is a bridge connecting a modern American family with people who lived centuries before them. It survived border changes, it survived ocean crossings, and it survived language shifts. I want to read you this really powerful quote straight from our source material. Quote, "A surname may tell you what your ancestors were called. Genealogy helps you discover who they actually were." Knowing your name means Becker is wonderful, sure. But connecting it with historical records reveals the resilient human beings who baked that bread, who raised their children, and who eventually crossed a massive ocean to build an entirely new life.
So I want to hear from you right now. What is your German last name? Do you know what it means, or maybe the ancestral hometown your family came from? Drop your surname and your family story in the comments below. Someone watching this explainer might just recognize your surname or have a connection to that exact same German village. Let's build an awesome community of discovery right down in the comments.
And if you want to keep exploring the incredible traditions, the travel, and the history behind your roots, be sure to follow German Heritage USA. Leave a comment, share this explainer with your family, and go visit them at GermanHeritageUSA.com.
We'll leave you with this final thought. Your surname might not tell your entire family story, but it contains a clue, an occupation, a landscape, a forgotten spelling. Sometimes, discovering your heritage begins with something as simple as the name you write every single day. Got a little German in you? Well, your German heritage is calling you. Open up that old family trunk, look at the name on the tag, and start exploring.